greatest city in all the world, Gary, Indiana. And this is the chemical reaction. Well, folks, here we are again after another violent reminder of America's racial climate and how divided it is. This time we've got Charlottesville, Virginia, and it's come to symbolize the seemingly permanent schism between blacks and whites in this long-lasting experiment we call America. This time on last Saturday, they had a rally to protest the removal of the statue of General Robert E. Lee, and things got hectic when a lot of neo-Nazis and alt-right groups met anti-fascist, anti-racist groups, and there was a clash, and people got hurt, and somebody eventually died. And people just keep asking, how did we get to this point in America? How did we get here? I say the answer lies in the people that we look up to, our heroes. That's how we got to this point. I think this is what people need to understand. For many white people, particularly in the South, General Robert E. Lee is a hero. He represented the losing side in the Civil War, but to him he represents the South's independence and defiance and what they consider the overreaching federal government. Also white supremacy. For virtually everyone else on the planet, General Robert E. Lee is the guy who lost the Civil War, which was fought to maintain slavery and white supremacy. And here's the ironic thing, though, about this whole controversy. Robert E. Lee himself was against Confederate symbols. Robert E. Lee himself was against statues that memorialized the Confederacy after the Civil War. And he was against using the Confederate flag. I mean, you can look it up. Robert E. Lee himself thought that societies should immediately move on from civil wars. And he thought that the South would never be able to move on beyond the Civil War as long as it maintained Confederate memorials and the Confederate flag. That's pretty ironic considering that you have white people marching to keep his statue up. But anyway, so he's a hero to much of white America. For many blacks, you look at our heroes. Nat Turner. Nat Turner's a hero because he led an uprising against his slave owners and did his best to release the shackles of oppression from his people who were trapped in a dehumanizing institution like slavery, But for a lot of white people, Nat Turner's a violent sadist who murdered women and children. For white people, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson represent freedom from the oppressive British Empire. They're men who fought to make sure that people could pursue life, liberty, and happiness and religious freedom and all in this new colony that would become America. For the rest of us people of color, they represent slave-owning rapists who helped to kill millions of Native Americans and enslaved and raped black people, even while going on and on about all men being created equal in the eyes of God. You could throw Christopher Columbus in that lot too. He was a sex trafficker. He was a murderer. But to many whites, he's still a hero. You can see the disparity in even when you saw what's happening with Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick, the former quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, who came to prominence last year when he started kneeling before the national anthem because out of protest because of what he saw as racial prejudice and discrimination and police brutality. And for every black person I know sees Colin Kaepernick as a hero. Okay? Many whites, on the other hand, see him as somebody who's unpatriotic, who chose his protest the wrong way, even though it was completely peaceful. It's funny that much of white America always asks black people to protest peacefully, but then when black people protest peacefully, they find a way to blackball you. So now Colin Kaepernick's been blackballed from the NFL. Even though he's the 17th highest rated passer in NFL history, this is a guy with a higher passer rating than guys who've won Super Bowls, guys like Phil Simms. So anyway, he's been blackballed basically out of the NFL. He's probably not going to play in the NFL anytime soon. I hope he does, but he probably won't. And a lot of the excuse that NFL teams are using is, well, he had a Fidel Castro T-shirt on. He was wearing a shirt with Malcolm X and Fidel Castro. And the funny thing about that is Malcolm X and Fidel Castro both represent, once again, two people that many Africans and people of African descent see as heroes, but much of white America see as horrible people. To many blacks, Malcolm X is one of the greatest civil rights leaders of all time who helped awaken a lot of black people to the realities of racism and stood up against white supremacy and the unfairness and injustice in America. Fidel Castro, and you don't hear this a lot in the American media, is a man who helped South Africa, Angola, Zimbabwe, many African countries gain their independence. Fidel Castro also helped send plenty of aid during the Ebola crisis to West Africa while they were dealing with Ebola. When Nelson Mandela got out of prison, the first thing he did was he went to see Fidel Castro in Cuba and thank him personally and invite him to South Africa so that he could be thanked personally by the South African Congress. Fidel Castro went to South Africa and got a standing ovation in South Africa's Congress. Look it up. It's probably on YouTube, folks. You can look it up. Fidel Castro, when he died, there was mourning across the African continent. But once again, to much of white America and white Cubans in Miami, Fidel Castro is a dictator and he's the worst guy in the history of the world. So I think to a large extent, where we're at is because of our heroes. Even look at somebody like Nelson Mandela. Everybody loves Nelson Mandela now. Everybody loves Nelson Mandela. Everybody talks about how great he was. Well, up through Ronald Reagan, the American government stance on Nelson Mandela was that he was a terrorist. The UK's Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, called him that. He's a terrorist. The U.S. government helped put him in prison for 27 years. The American government sympathized with the apartheid government in South Africa and aided and abetted the South African apartheid government. Guess who opposed the apartheid government that Nelson Mandela was fighting? Fidel Castro. So now you see that this is how we get to this point. We have different heroes. Black people and white people have different heroes. We have different standards of justice. I think to a large extent we just have to accept that and move on with our lives. The goal should not be to, I believe at this point, to be friends. The goal should be to coexist. We're all in this country together, and there's not really, I'm not going nowhere. My parents were born here. My grandparents, well, most of my grandparents were born here. Most of my great-grandparents were born here. I ain't going nowhere. White people probably aren't going anywhere either. We should be thinking about coexisting and trying to figure out how to create a general high American standard of living, more so than anything else, rather than trying to repair a relationship. Because we're never going to have the same heroes, folks. We're never going to have the same standards of justice. White people will always love slave owners and people who were flawed, and so we as black people. We have our own people who are flawed, but after 400, 500 years of colonialism and slavery, we support the people who ride with us, and who helped us out. Whether it's Nat Turner or Fidel Castro or whoever. So ultimately, I think that has to be more than anything else. Also about this Charlottesville thing, the funny thing to me, right, is how the corporate mainstream media is reacting to Trump's reaction to Charlottesville. You know, first they're outraged that he didn't come out soon enough. Then when he did, they were outraged that he didn't denounce white supremacists. And then once he did that, they said it was too late. And now they're saying he's drawing equivalence between white supremacists and the left-wing anti-fascist, anti-racist groups that oppose them. What did you folks think you were getting with Donald Trump? What did you think you were getting? This is who he is. This is who Donald Trump has been. He was this when liberals loved Donald Trump. When they were all a part of his beauty pageants. After he said all the things he said about the innocent young men who were the Central Park Five. After he lost his racial discrimination lawsuit in the 70s. You know? This is who he is. And look, let's not even just blame this on Donald Trump. This is who America is. 12 of the first 18 presidents of the United States owned slaves. 12 of the first 18, folks. Don't tell me Donald Trump is some departure from the norm in America, or he's the worst president in the history of the world, most racist president we've ever had. 12 of the first 18 literally owned slaves. Calling back to Thomas Jefferson, he regularly molested his underage slave, Sally Hemings, and had, I think, 5 kids by her. You guys can look that up. She was 14. 13, 14 years old. Thomas Jefferson started having sex with her, his slave. Thomas Jefferson also said that the blacks are inferior to the whites in the endowments of both body and mind. That's not a white supremacist? Andrew Johnson, another president we had, who was Lincoln's vice president, said this is a country for white men. And as long as I am a president, it should be a government for white men. That's not white supremacist? You know, Woodrow Wilson, the only doctor to ever be the president of the United States, so he's supposed to really be smart, actually took the Ku Klux Klan oath in the Oval Office. Yes, we had a sitting president take the Ku Klux Klan oath in the Oval Office of the United States. Another one of our presidents, Harry S. Truman, was another member of the Ku Klux Klan. Dropped a bomb that incinerated 300,000 people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even though he didn't have to, contrary to popular belief. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, General MacArthur, all of them told him he didn't have to drop that bomb. The war was over. Japan's government was collapsing. Harry Truman, the former member of the Ku Klux Klan, dropped the bomb to warn Russia. That's who's held the president of the United States, a man who incinerated 300,000 people in a pissing contest with Russia. Richard Nixon started the war on drugs solely to destroy the black community and hippies. John Ehrlichman said this, one of his former aides who was in the White House working with him. Ronald Reagan took the war on drugs from Nixon and started helping drug cartels in Central America flood our communities with cocaine, kickstarting the most violent, destructive period in modern history, the crack epidemic. Bill Clinton took Reagan's war on drugs and gave us the Clinton crime bill that put more black people in jail than Reagan did. And black people love him because he played the saxophone, smoked weed, and cheated on his wife. And went on Arsenio Hall's show or something. And he got his offices in Harlem. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. He put millions of blacks in jail. Him and his family are raping Haiti as we speak. But let's love him because he plays the saxophone and went on the Arsenio Hall show and has all these Uncle Tom black ministers fooled. You know? The last president we had, you know, the black one? This is a guy who regularly lectured black people on how to raise their kids. who destroyed the African country with the highest living standard, universal health care, universal literacy, because its leader refused to continue America and Europeans to plunder to have easy access to its oil. You know? So when I see liberals like Michael Moore excoriating Trump for comparing Robert E. Lee to Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, I go, what the fuck is wrong with you? What the hell is wrong with you? Don't you know the evil things those men did to black people? But this is who liberals are these days. Liberals are willing to make peace with America's white supremacist history just to get Donald Trump out the way. Really? And when Mike Pence is president, then what? Then what you gonna do? You know, Mike Pence might not be the type of brash, blustering, bloviating blowhard that Donald Trump is, but you better believe he will get things done, and they won't be good things. And you won't have, Twitter posts to get outraged about. You won't have none of that. You'll just see the military-industrial complex ramp up and the prison-industrial complex ramp up, and you'll see Wall Street doing whatever the hell they want, like it's been doing. So please, don't spread this idea that Donald Trump is the exception, liberals. Anybody out there. Donald Trump is not the exception, regardless of what Mitt Romney or Michael Moore or any of these other people tell you. No, Donald Trump is not the exception. Donald Trump is the rule. All right, folks, we can kick it on Twitter at The Chemist Lives. The Chemist is spelled with a K because I'm a product of the Gary Community School System. And you can hit me up. We can talk about politics, music, sports. You can tell me how terrible I am at this. Or you could just listen to me on WLTH 1370 AM, where I do the Counterpoint segments on Mondays and Wednesdays at 5:45 Central Time. And you can listen to me every Monday from 6 to 8 on Issues and Answers with my boys Jonathan Booz and Lloyd Fisher. I am the Chemist. This was the Chemical Reaction. God bless the working class, and God bless organized labor. I'm out.